Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another lesson of class. This is lesson 26, how to break the hex. So, what is a hex to begin with? Well, a hex is like a curse or something that would happen in the spiritual world or the magical world or whatever you want to call it, so on and so forth, to make you feel depressed, despair, make you want to do things to yourself that you never wanted to do. Now, we're going to get into it because, well, we have to break it, right? Because there's only but so much someone can take before they open their mouth correctly so that people can open their ears and then use their eyes the way they were supposed to be intended. So let's connect some puzzle pieces. But first, let's talk about breaking this hex. So one of the things we have to understand is that when I say hex, you have to look at this like an entendre, right? So we're going to take marketing, magic, and psychology, right? Because in marketing, when you're in design, you have the color code, which is, well, normally RBG, but then there's also a 6-digit pattern called a hex, right? In psychology, they have the hexaco, right? Right, hexaco, if you study, who is it, Tai Lopez, he mentions it a lot, so on and so forth. It goes to your HR specialist to make sure that, yeah, you kind of fit with the people, kind of don't fit with the people, so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to other things, right, when you're talking about magic, you have a hex. If you ever seen Charmed, they talk about putting a hex on somebody. You remember the song, I Put a Spell on You, so on and so forth? Right, so you have to remember something. It was in the one of the Avengers movies. Thor said that anything that has not been defined by science is indistinguishable from magic. So let's talk about it, right? So, how to begin breaking the hex? Well, first you have to realize that you're under one, right? Now, what do I mean by this? Well, once you realize that you're under one, you have to start pushing back. And when you push back, it will be hard. There will be tears. There will be a lot of feelings. There will be a lot of emotions that you must master in order to do and accomplish this very thing. Now, pain is weakness leaving the body. This is something that the Marines taught me, right? Anytime you feel pain, you get stronger. You go to the gym, you develop a callus, right? But it hurts when you're doing it, but you do get stronger. When you exercise, yes, do you feel sore the next day? Yes, but is your blood pressure lower? Are you feeling better? Did you release endorphins that made you happy? So on and so forth. I mean, think about the reasons why you're doing something and see if it brings you joy and happiness instead of pit and sorrow, right? Right. And when I say pit, I mean the bottomless spiral, right? Because people can spiral up in life as well as spiral down. Look at the healthcare community symbol. It literally has a spiral on it that looks like a drill. Think about that for a second, right? Now, when you're working on your emotions and everything like that, now, for some people, like women, it would be easy for them to release their emotions. But if you're a man in this world, or if you're a boy, you get looked at differently if you start to cry. It's okay for girls to cry, but if a boy cries, he's weak. Now, these are the things that people don't understand. Just because you cry does not mean you're weak. Just because you can feel does not mean you are weak. Now, when you're working on this, I suggest you do it in private. I know people don't respect boundaries. I have a friend named Scott that doesn't understand that mentioned that I had a lot of triggers. However, he did not understand what I was trying to say or do, right? This is why people get emotional support animals, because they need to feel connected to something, right? It's bad to be alone, especially if you're in a depressed state, right? Would be the hex that I'm talking about, right? So let's get into the psychology and everything else, right? So after you go ahead and you start practicing these things in private, next use that energy to build yourself back up and build your defenses. Remember, if you're in discomfort or dis-ease, it's going to create a disease, right? Because if you don't exercise, if you don't move your body, if you don't release your emotions, you're going to go crazy and you're going to cause a lot of stress on the body. And anybody who's a doctor, anybody who has common sense or read a book knows that if you have too much stress in the body, things start to eradicate, right? This is what's known as free radicals, right? Or cells that do not get along with other cells are known as free radicals. So you have to do things in order to get rid of them. This is your energetic release if you want to use that terminology. Now, here's something that's interesting that I learned in the South, where they love saying, oh, bless your heart. And trust me, I already know what you're saying, but learn a new language. People can't take offense to what they don't understand because of their association to the words that are being used. So if you drop something like, I don't know, something that comes from taboo language that Sigmund Freud talks about, Tony Robbins mentions this in his UPW, so on and so forth, people will get triggered with taboo language because of their associations to the word. But if you say something in diferente palabra, different languages, maybe Spanish, maybe Chinese, maybe Russian, so on and so forth, then people will not only be confused, but they won't have a reason to feed on the negativity that revolves in the world. People are always looking for a reason to disrupt your peace, right? And because negativity weighs heavy on the heart, everybody is looking to, well, be triggered, and that negativity will trigger them. You can say as many positive things as you want, but the moment the negativity comes out, they want to start backlashing, talking back, and doing all these other things, right? So let's get into it. Learn a new language, get Rosetta Stone, get Babbel, so on and so forth, etc. Develop yourself. What does this also do? You learn Spanish, you get to speak to what? Central America, South America, which is a whole continent within itself, right? And then if you, of course, you learn other languages, you could travel to Europe and then learn Italian, learn French, so on and so forth. For Christ's sake, don't be scared. Learn Chinese for everything that's going on in the world, whether that's Mandarin or Cantonese, so you can understand their news, their politics, what it is that they're saying, right? Because it's a tonal language, right? Now let's move forward. Here's something that you have to understand and you have to do. When you're under this spell or this hex, right? You have to do 4 things. You have to question, then listen, then learn, and then understand, in that order. Why? Because if you don't have a question, then you don't know what to listen to. If you don't listen, then you can't learn. And if you don't learn and apply things, you won't understand it, right? So those are the steps that I want you to take. I want you to question things in life. I want you to listen to things in life. I want you to learn from things in life, so on and so forth. And then finally, understand it, right? Why does the girl cry and look with her head down, so on and so forth, and look sad, when you could pick up on that energy and you just have to ask a simple question like, how's your day going? What's your day like? Are you okay? And then listen to understand. Don't listen to respond, right? When you listen to respond, you're exposing your negative thought pattern, right? If you listen to understand, you become more positive, because then you get to see the other person's perspective and perceptions of the world that they live in, right? So when you start to master these skills in private and you start to build yourself up and you start to get back out into the world, maybe you lost a family member, maybe you went through a bad breakup, maybe you and your friend, got into a fight, so on and so forth. Once you develop that strength back, you want to start speaking with conviction, not just confidence. Right? Now I'm going to use different language here, and I'm going to use a lot of different words to hopefully hit different people at different areas, right? So the reason why I say speak with conviction, not just confidence, is because the witches understand, they just pretend. People will say, huh? What'd you say? But they heard you the first time. They just pretend that they didn't, right? So speak with conviction. What is conviction? Well, conviction, it comes with the understanding of what you're speaking of, right? You're not just going to regurgitate the same words that you got out of a book. Add your own sauce to it and bring understanding to the community. We do this in marketing. We understand the ideal client avatar, and then we are able to speak to the populace, right? And then after we speak to the populace, they say, man, I don't know what it is, but I feel like that person understands me. They just get me. I don't know how, but they just do. And that's because with time, with questions, listening, learning, and understanding, not responding or assuming, right? For instance, I'll give you a little thing. I went through an incident in Charlotte where Atrium Health wanted to go ahead and start questioning me because I was saying a lot of stuff that, well, I shouldn't know. And then, of course, the medical doctors wanted to go ahead and study me like a scientist or whatever, or like their pet rat. And, that didn't go very well. And then, of course, word started getting around and people wanted to play these games. I had some girl call me a name. I had some other girl say another name. And I was like, interesting. Since you guys want to play this game, who told you all this information? Where did you get all this information? Was it the Bluetooth that you were listening to? Was it the Wi-Fi or the telephone that you were into? How did you hear everything? How are you so precise? Now, when you speak back to those demons or whatever, those devils that are out there, or those evil people, right? You want to go ahead and question them, because when they get questioned, it's hard for them to answer, or they'll just catch amnesia all of a sudden. Oh, I didn't say that. I didn't do that. Oh, so you must have dementia. Or you must have amnesia. Hold on, let me take you to the hospital because I know doctors that could give you a pill for that. Or maybe treat you for that, since you want to play dumb right now. Unless you actually do have a disease. But if so, let's do a brain scan. Let's do a CAT scan. Let's make sure that everything is okay, because I know you heard me the first time. Now that your amnesia and dementia is kicking in, I think we need to get you checked out. All right? Remember, there's 2 snakes and another one on the ambulance. I'll get to the 3 in a second. So now that you understand these things, I want to get into what's known as sex magic, right? Now, what is sex magic? Well, both males and females have an attraction for connection, right? Whether that is masculine energy with female energy, so on and so forth, because we all possess a 50-50 split, right? You know, it's been proven by science that clownfish, if you watch Nemo, that the male can actually transform into a female just to keep the species alive. Crazy how far that would go, right? Now, when it comes to sex magic, that can be used to control and manipulate the mind. How so? Well, let's get into it. So when this happens and you start to develop these emotions, these feelings, the subterfuge and everything else, think courtesan, right? So on and so forth. Or think not just courtesan, because that would be Sun Tzu, Art of War, right? He was told to train a bunch of concubines, and the person that he put in charge laughed at him. So what he did was he cut her head off, looked at the second person and said, I want you to put these people in formation. Do you understand me now? The point quickly got across because, well, the first person lost their life. They thought it was a joke till they realized there was no games involved. And that right there is the subtle differences, right? Because everybody thinks everything's a game until it affects them. Look at what happened with COVID, right? Everybody was laughing and wanted all this stuff, so on and so forth, until it affected them. Then magically they cured an invisible virus in under a year, but yet they can't cure diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and all these other things. Think about that for a second, right? So let's get back into sex magic. So this also gets someone to fall into hypnosis a lot easier because the person becomes open to suggestion, right? Because, and guys are notorious for this, they will go ahead and fight over women. They will go ahead and listen to women. One guy could be married or dating a woman, and if that woman sleeps with somebody else that's a man, that man may feel confident enough to try to fight, so on and so forth, etc. But there's no point. She should just go with him because she never cared about the first one in the first place. Think about it. So when you're open to suggestion, it leaves room for things like hypnosis and psychological subtleties to happen, right? In advertising, there is something that's illegal in the United States, but it has been done before, where it's called subliminal messaging. They'll play a low frequency, or they'll play a type of command during a song or a video or something else while it's playing, so that it can plant the seed, as they say. And then over time, that seed develops to grow. And then with reinforcement, it gets bigger and larger. And then eventually you carry out an action, right? And the reason this occurred was because you were open, right? This is why they say, open your mind. Don't stay so closed, blah, blah, blah. But the moment something gets a little bit too sketchy, then they do other things and try to investigate. And these are the witches at hand that try to put a hex on you. Now, if you are under a hex or a spell, so on and so forth, whatever language you are, right? Maybe you're depressed, maybe you're hypomanic, maybe you're psychotic, maybe you have narcissism, or you're sadistic, right? and you like to laugh at other people's pain. Well, this is one way to get through it, right? So remember, practice in private, then bring that to conviction and confidence, right? Not just confidence, but conviction, and then go ahead and start to do everything else, right? Now, let's keep going. So how do you break this hex once you're into, in too deep, right? Well, I have a couple points here, and I have my little journal because I didn't have to bring my laptop. I wanted to do this off the cuff, but I'm pressed for time, so we'll just get into it. This is able to be done over time with the understanding of good and evil. Now, if you are an evil person and you get put underneath the hex, you will eventually carry out whatever that negative thing is. If you are a good person, you understand what good is, then you will more than likely stick to the positive side and you won't carry out that action, whether that be to do harm to yourself or to others or feel depressed or whatever the case may be. Remember, everything has a side effect. Remember that. Doctors say they're there to help, but then why do they always give the brand version instead of the generic brand? Why? Interesting. Now, if you pay attention and you open your eyes, remember the last lesson was talking about seeing once again, right? Evil spelled backwards is lived. Without understanding and the willingness to see, you will be blinded by the veil. Now let's play with this for a second, right? It's a 4-letter code, right? L-I-V-E, right? Spell it backwards, it's evil, right? And the reason why is because the people that have thought that they lived life already act evil, like a devil. And if you say devil, or if you spell devil backwards, it spells lived. Now, if I were to jumble the letters up of live or live, it spells veil. Right? So I'm going to do something for you guys that a priest once did for me, and I'm going to try to start dropping the veil for some of you so that you can break this hex that you have on you. And that's the purpose of this lesson. So what kind of veil has a hex? Well, in psychology, as I mentioned earlier, is the Hexaco score. Some of you might understand this as the Myers-Briggs 16 personality types, which has a 4-digit code that tells you about your personality. But if you're in sales, they also have the DISC profile, which also breaks down personality types, right? And then in marketing within design, you have RBG, but then there's the 6-digit code with a hashtag in the front that gives you a hex number, right? So that would be 000000, which would be, that would be the color black. And then you have 6 Fs, that would be the color white, right? Now, in the beginning, remember I said I'm more like a referee, so don't try to take anything too personally and try to take things out on me. I'm just trying to see if evil's on this side and good's on this side. I'm saying, all right, guys, I'm trying to help you out here because the scales are out of balance and I see it all over, right? There's a lot of crazy making going on. And that's the thing that we have to push back against, right? Especially you yourself. So in mathematics, this is where it gets interesting because if you ever seen the movie, what was it? There was a movie called Hunger Games, and the girl in the movie Hunger Games carried a mockingjay little bird on her, right? And she was selected because it went against the beliefs of everything that they were trying to teach. It was kind of like sticking a middle finger up in the air, so on and so forth, etc. And people want to call you out over it without understanding exactly what you were trying to do or say, that is, right? And because of that small pin, because of the Mockingjay, remember the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Mockingjay, Mockingbird, Hunger Games, etc. In there, I think it's the second one or the third one, there comes a point where she actually takes an arrow and she shoots it at the sky and there's a holographic projection that comes out. And the holographic projection that comes out is in the shape of a hexagon. Now, this gets interesting because an internal part of a hexagon, if we're breaking this down mathematically, is 720, whereas the outside is 360. What does this mean? Well, if everything adds up to 1, it's interesting that both numbers add up to the number 9. Yes or yes, right? This would be like the shape of a honeycomb if you study bees, so on and so forth, etc. Now, what's so important about the number 9? Well, the number 9 relates to a lot of things, like the Ninth Amendment. Just because a right hasn't been written down doesn't mean it can't be taken away from you. It shouldn't be taken away from you, right? Oh, well, that doesn't exist. But rights exist to certain groups of people, and those rights should not be taken. Right? Now let's talk about the spiritual world, right? Because the Bill of Rights was based off the 10 Commandments. So the ninth commandment would be not to lie or deceive others, especially in a legal setting. So bear false witness, right? Oh, I think that person's crazy. Yeah, that one's crazy right there. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I could break this down every which way from Sunday and give you a very good education on things. However, you are too blinded by your greed. So leave the greed behind and move forward, right? To try to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So these are some of the things that I not only ponder over, but wonder why nobody else has talked about it. Now, depending on your medium, now that's a word for what you watch. If you know Kendrick Lamar, he has that song, Turn Their TV Off, right? So over time, one might believe everything they see and hear on TV, right? Some people might believe what they see and hear on TV is actually real and the TV's talking to them, right? I actually had somebody in that situation and the doctor was like, is the TV talking to you? And I just looked at him, I looked at the doctor, I was like, first of all, why did the doctor ask that question? And why did that person respond that way? You know? So this is a hex at work because remember in marketing, the hex code, right? The 16-digit code with RBG, red, blue, and green is how you project onto a screen, right? That's how you would go ahead and get and assort all these colors. Now, if you are dealing with art, you would have the color yellow, right? Now, the color yellow is a part of the primary colors, but if you're talking about the digital world, you need the color green, which comes from blue and yellow meshed together, and then you have blue and red, so on and so forth. Now, when Kendrick Lamar is saying they're not like us and to turn off their TV, well, yeah, turn off their TV, take away their tablet, take away their cell phone, make them go outside, right? Socialize once again, instead of always being on the internet on social media, right? You might learn something. You might get exercise. You might find a friend. You might not be alone anymore. But in order to do that, you have to take the first step. And the way to do that is to break the hex. So as I wrap up here, as I said, I was pressed for time. But as I wrap up here, I want to talk about, the power of 3, right? In, certain spiritual teachings like Christianity, there's 3 crosses, right? However, the Romans traditionally had crosses in a row when they crucified people, similar to Vlad the Impaler, all right? So if you think about the 3, what's so special about it? What are they trying to say, right? Because you have in magic the little charm symbol or the Celtic knot, which was from Wicca or that type of magic, so on and so forth, but it sometimes represents the Holy Trinity, etc. But then, of course, in Hunger Games, she does the 3 fingers, right? Scout's honor, etc. If you were an Eagle Scout, not a Girl Scout, making money and hustling, selling cookies, right? So she does the 3 fingers, so on and so forth, and she goes out into the world, right? And she has to fight everybody just to survive, which is the life that we're living right now. You go to work, you're trying to survive. You make just enough, they add inflation, right? Which is another word for taxes, but they're not going to tell you that. And because of the disassociation, remember, learn another language, you don't get upset over it. So thanks to Dr. Jordan Peterson, let's go further, right? Because to sin means to miss the mark, and that comes from an archery term. Now, being former military and qualifying with iron sights, people will understand that the 3 crosses also pertains to iron sights, right? If you were to make a peace symbol with one hand and put your finger in the other, right, a 1 finger up, you can line up your sights. When you shoot a bow and arrow, you hold the arrow with 2, you point to where your target is like you're shooting pool, and you let go and the arrow flies. But it flies in an arc. It doesn't fly in a straight pattern, and the arrow flexes through the air, similar to a bullet. A bullet arcs through the air, but it's a lot smaller, right? But it tumbles as it goes. And then, of course, you have Orion's belt, right? When you look at Orion's belt, there's three stars that make up Orion's belt that correlate to the pyramids, right? The three major pyramids, right? So if you start looking around, you'll start to understand. And then you have the TV show, The Third Rock from the Sun, which refers to Earth, right? The stomping ground between Venus and Mars, right? The feminine and the masculine energy, if you want to say that. All right. Now, what's this connection? Well, as you know, I'm notorious for putting the puzzle pieces together with simple numbers and just using the three fingers or the number three, Orion's belt, the pyramids, the three crosses, the three musketeers, the three blind mice, so on and so forth. You know, you have to eventually start to say, am I missing something? Why didn't I see this before? Why didn't anybody talk about this before? How is it that Orion's belt correlates to the pyramids, but then you have the three blind mice and then everything else that comes along with it, right? So it's very interesting and powerful because even the charmed symbol, which would be the Celtic knot, is in three different angles pointing in three different directions, right? And now if you have a compass, you know that there's three different norths, right? You have the magnetic north, you have the other north, and you true north, right? I can't remember the other one. But you have to remember, where is your guiding star? Where is your north, right? Remember that from this point forward, because I want to help you. I want to pull you out of it, but you have to want to do it. Because if you don't, there's nothing I could do, and I'll just walk away because I'm not going to force you to do anything. You know, one of the times I tried to help somebody, I may have gotten a little passionate. And I said, if you keep it up, I'll leave you right where you stand and right where I found you. Because they didn't want help. They thought they knew everything. You know, they started saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And if you keep talking, my boys are going to do this. These people are going to do that. And they tried to preach a lot of fear. One thing you don't do to a military personnel, especially one that's in the Marines, is preach fear, because they're trained to run towards it, right? Now, if you think about it, right? King Arthur, if you've seen the movie King Arthur with Clive Owen, there's a part at the end of the movie where they're supposed to be leaving, right? But they could hear the war drums. And because they've been in battle so much, even their horses start to turn back and charge, right? Not like a cow that runs from the storm, but a buffalo that charges into the eye of the storm, right? Have you ever seen the movie Dances with Wolves, where he talks about Tatanka and he's trying to understand the Native American languages, so on and so forth, etc. Buffaloes are known to run towards the eye of the storm and run towards it because there's less damage doing that than running away from it and getting hit by it later, right? So take everything from this and try to practice it. Now, I know this wasn't a long lesson. It's roughly 30 minutes. But eventually the pieces will start to connect. And if you haven't seen the other pieces or the other lessons, by all means, keep going, right? Because I'm going to leave you with this. In martial arts, if you study jujitsu, they have the triangle. Why do they have a triangle in the representation of a pyramid in jujitsu? Well, you need, when rock climbing or anything else, 2 points of contact, right? Or sometimes 3 points of contact, right? But in jujitsu, you have the armpits, right? That's 2 points of contact, and the groin. If you're a wrestler, you understand these things. That's how you throw your opponent off balance, especially if you're doing something like Greco-Roman wrestling or what's it called? Other types of wrestling, so on and so forth. But in order to get a hold of somebody, if they're not wearing a gi or anything like that, and they're sweaty, you want to, utilize the body against itself, right? So think about that and think about everything that I just said and see if it applies to your life. And then do me a favor, leave a comment down below and explain to me what you took away from this. If it helped you, if it didn't, if you think it's BS, that's perfectly fine. And if it did help you, don't forget to follow me and subscribe. This has been lesson 26, how to break the hex. Have a great day.